Reese, and the internet was buzzing. There's a lot of speculation here. Now, this is an NBA show, but I need to know.
While Wendell Carter Jr. was locked in during an NBA season, giving everything he had on the floor every single night, a story dropped that put his relationship directly in the crosshairs. Word got out that Angel Reese, his girl, had been getting close to one of the most famous basketball players on the planet, Anthony Edwards, Ant-Man, the face of the Minnesota Timberwolves and one of the most electrifying athletes in the entire sport. The story spread fast, screenshots moved, comment sections blew up, and everybody who knew about Carter and Ree had one question they could not let go of. Did Wendell Carter Jr. find out? And if he did, what exactly did he say? That question took over the conversation for days. Reaction videos stacked on top of each other before most people had even slowed down long enough to ask where the story actually came from. Everybody had a tape. Everybody had an opinion. And somewhere inside all of that noise, the truth got buried under the weight of the moment before anyone went looking for it. This is the full story, where it started, how it spread the way it did, what actually happened, and what Wendell Carter Jr. said when the cameras warned him. Stay with this, because by the time we get to Carter's reaction, you're going to understand exactly what his words mean in the context of everything that came before him. To understand why this story hit the way it did, you have to understand who Angel Reese is and what she means to the culture right now. This was not a rumor about a random athlete. This was a rumor about one of the most visible women in sports. A name that generates immediate engagement every single time it appears anywhere. Reese's journey to that level runs through Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where she became the centerpiece of one of the most celebrated college basketball programs in the country. When the LSU Tigers captured the 2023 national championship, Reese's celebration at the final buzzer became one of the most analyzed moments in women's basketball history, generating conversations that ran far beyond sports into culture, identity, and what it means to take up space with no apologies. That moment made her someone the culture felt strongly about on all sides. And that kind of polarizing visibility is its own form of power. It also made her a target, because when the culture decides someone matters at that level, it simultaneously decides that it is owed access to every part of their life. The Chicago Sky selected her 7th overall in the 2024 Wnba draft. What followed was a rookie season that proved she belonged. Reese established herself immediately as one of the most effective rebounders in the league, made the All-Star team in her first year, stacked endorsement deals with names like Reebok, and built a brand presence that extended well beyond basketball. Her audience was massive, loyal, and deeply engaged. The trifecta that very few athletes ever authentically deliver. She was not just an athlete, she was an industry. Her podcast, Unapologetically Angel, gave her a direct line to that audience that most athletes never build. A space where she controlled the narrative rather than reacting to someone else's version of it. And she needed that control because the stories that built around her personal life came fast and came constantly from every direction. Music, she talked about the 6-year relationship with Cameron Fletcher that ended in early 2024, a breakup that became public property before she had even fully processed it herself. The moment that chapter closed, the internet opened the next one without her permission, immediately attaching her name to whoever seemed plausible. She addressed the Kevin Durant story, which grew from nothing more than a seating arrangement at a Paris Olympics game, and shut it down on the record. She addressed the G Herbo situation that built from a video of her leaving an arena in his vehicle, and explained that he had simply extended support to a new face in Chicago, nothing more. Each time a narrative built around her personal life, she stepped into it with specifics and dismantled music. That approach built loyalty at massive scale. It also built an audience so invested in the details of her personal life that any new name appearing in her orbit became a story the moment it surfaced. The audience was always primed. They just needed the next name to drop. Before Carter's name fully entered the picture, the internet had already been trying to connect Reese to other NBA players. Early in 2024, speculation briefly linked her to Detroit Pistons center Jalen Duran after the two were spotted in similar locations during the Olympic break. Neither confirmed anything, and the story faded. Her preference for tall NBA players had been stated publicly, and the internet treated that preference like a map it could use to predict her next move. Every time she attended an NBA game, every time she posted anything that could be read as adjacent to a player, the speculation machinery activated. The audience was always ready. They just needed the next name to appear. The name Wendell Carter Jr. entered that orbit gradually, then all at once. Carter is a center for the Orlando Magic, a 7-0 interior presence who has spent his career quietly building a reputation as one of the more reliable big men in the Eastern Conference. He was drafted 4th overall by the Chicago Bulls in 2018 out of Duke University. Went through several seasons in Chicago developing his game and landed in Orlando, was part of a trade that put him on a Magic roster with real upward momentum in the East. He is not a highlight machine, and he was never trying to be. He is a professional in the truest sense, someone who shows up every night, anchors the paint, reads the pick and roll with intelligence, and earns the respect of coaches and teammates without needing the camera to follow him home. His public profile outside of basketball had always been quiet and deliberate. His social media presence is measured. His appearances away from the court stayed focused on the game. He was not someone who generated personal drama, and he had not cultivated the kind of celebrity footprint that tends to attract the gossip ecosystem. That changed completely and immediately the moment his name entered Angel Reese's orbit, because the gravitational pull of her story and the culture is strong enough to draw in anyone connected to her regardless of how carefully they've built their life away from that world. Once her name and his were connected, there was no walking it back. The story was alive, and it was going to keep growing until something settled it. The first signals came during the 2024-25 NBA season when Reese started making consistent appearances at Magic games in Orlando. Athletes attend NBA games during the Wnba off-season all the time. That alone is not unusual. What was unusual was the frequency in the specific building she kept showing up in. People in the arena noticed. People outside noticed shortly after. The story of what exactly she was doing at Magic games with that kind of consistency started moving through the conversation before anyone had the full picture. What started as quiet observation became open conversation. And the story built steadily through those months, gaining weight with every appearance, every sighting, every connection drawn between her presence in that building and the man anchoring the Magic front court. Then came May 2025 and Reese's 23rd birthday party. Carter showed up. That attendance alone kept the conversation running for days, because people who had been watching this bill from a distance felt they had all the confirmation they needed. The absence of an official statement did not slow things down. It accelerated them. Silence in a situation like this does not read as privacy. It reads as fuel. It gives the story room to grow in whatever direction the audience decides to take it. And the audience always decides to take it somewhere dramatic. When Carter was later seen at a public event wearing a Reese shirt and was photographed close to her with the kind of body language that communicates before words do, the story hit a full boil. Nothing had been officially confirmed, but the public had already decided, and a public that has already decided is not looking for confirmation. Music, it is looking for amplification. The relationship existed in the culture long before either music of them said so out loud. And it is exactly that space, unconfirmed, unspoken, fully alive in the imagination of an audience hungry for the next chapter. That became the target when the Anthony Edwards rumor dropped into it, because that space gave the rumor machine everything it needed, and it used every bit of it. Before Carter's name fully entered the picture, the internet had already been trying to connect Reese to other NBA players throughout 2024. Earlier that year, speculation briefly linked her to Detroit Pistons center Jalen Duran after the two were spotted in overlapping locations during the Olympic break. Neither confirmed anything and the story faded, but it left a template. The audience had proven it was willing to build a full relationship narrative from nothing more than geographic proximity and timing. Her publicly stated preference for tall elite basketball players was treated like a map the audience could use to predict her next move before she made it. Every time she attended an NBA game, every time she posted anything adjacent to a player, the speculation machinery activated immediately. The audience was always assembled and ready. They just needed the next name to appear. And when Anthony Edwards' name appeared, the reaction was instant, because right in the middle of all of that building energy around Carter and Ree, a new name got thrown into the fire. Not a small name, not a marginal figure. The name they threw in was Anthony Edwards. Edwards is 24 years old and already carrying the kind of franchise weight that most NBA players never touch. He was selected first overall in the 2020 draft out of the University of Georgia by the Minnesota Timberwolves. And in the years since, he has become one of the most compelling players the league has seen in a generation. He averaged over 28 points per game during the 202,425 regular season. He made the All-NBA second team in back-to-back years. He led the Timberwolves to consecutive Western Conference Finals appearances. He earned 4 All-Star selections and won the All-Star Game MVP in 2026. He won an Olympic gold medal with Team USA in Paris in 2024. He locked in a 5-year, $244 million extension with Minnesota in 2023. He is by every measure one of the 2 or 3 most talked about young players in the entire sport, and his name alone functions as an accelerant in any story it touches. What makes Edwards' music truly dangerous in a rumor cycle goes beyond a resume. His personality has turned him into a cultural figure on a level that very few athletes his age have achieved. He is candid, unfiltered, and genuinely unpredictable in a media landscape where most athletes have been coached to say nothing that moves. He says what he thinks. He responds to the moment without running it through a filter first. He is funny in a way that feels spontaneous rather than performed. And audiences respond to that quality with real investment because they can feel the difference between someone who is authentic and someone who is managed. When Edwards speaks, people believe it because he has spent years giving them no reason to think he is performing for that. Credibility is exactly what makes his name so dangerous when music gets attached to a story that is not real. Because the audience does not think twice about whether something attributed to him is plausible. They assume music it is. When his name appears in a story, any story, the audience is already assembled before the piece finishes loading. That is the level of attention he commands at this point in his career. And that reach is exactly what makes his name so valuable to anyone building engagement around a claim, regardless of whether the claim has any basis in reality. Attach Edwards to a story and the reaction is guaranteed. Attach Edwards to a story involving Angel Reese, 2 of the most talked about athletes in their respective music leagues, and the 2 largest individual sport audiences in the crossover space collide at once. That combination was too valuable for the rumor machine to leave alone. So here is exactly how the story music built and why people genuinely believed it. It did not come from one single moment. It built from a combination of things that individually meant nothing but together created exactly the kind of conditions that rumors need to catch fire. Start with the energy between them and the culture. Edwards and Reese were 2 of the most talked about young athletes in the sport at the exact same time. Both electric personalities, both commanding massive followings that overlap heavily. When those 2 names existed in the same cultural space simultaneously, the audience was always going to start drawing lines between them. The question was only what the connecting line was going to look like. Then came the moment that really started the conversation. During Reese's rookie season, the internet was relentless toward her. The comparisons were music constant, the criticism was loud, and a significant portion of it had nothing to do with basketball. Music. In the middle of all of that, Anthony Edwards went on record and stepped up for her publicly. He pushed back against what people were doing, called it out directly, and made clear he did not respect the way she was being treated. That moment was real and documented. But here is where it got twisted. When a man of Edwards' stature, music, young, one of the most famous players in the sport, single in the public conversation, goes out of his way to publicly defend a woman he has no formal professional relationship with. The audience does not read that as solidarity between athletes. The audience reads that as interest. The logic plays out in seconds. Why would he speak up unless he was invested in something beyond basketball? That interpretation spread fast and gave the entire dynamic between them a charge it did not previously have. From that point forward, everything between those 2 names got read through that lens. Fans started cataloging every crossover, every interaction, every moment where their worlds touched in the NBA conversation. Reese publicly stated her preference for tall elite basketball players. Edwards is 6 feet 4 inches, an Olympic gold medalist, and one of the most dominant players in the sport. He fit every description she had ever offered. The connection was already drawn in the audience's mind. All it needed was something to confirm it. That confirmation came in the form of a screenshot. A post circulated that appeared to show Edwards responding to a question about whether he would rather date Angel Rhee or pay out $500,000. The supposed reply read that he would pay the $500,000 to avoid the date. That image hit the moment it dropped, and it hit hard. People who had been watching the energy between these two names for months now had what felt like a definitive answer to a question they had been asking for a long time. The response was immediate and multi-directional. Fans who supported Reese were furious. This was one of the biggest names in basketball publicly disrespecting the woman they had been rooting for. Fans who had been critical of Rhee music felt entirely validated by what they read as a cold, calculated dismissal from someone with nothing to gain from the comment. People who followed Edwards were thrown because the public comment contradicted the documented reality of him having previously defended her when it would have been easier to stay silent. All three reactions spread simultaneously at full volume, and the combined wave of engagement was enormous. The story had its moment. The only problem was the moment was built on nothing. The post, music, did not exist. When people went looking for it on his actual timeline, it was not there, not buried, not deleted. It was never posted. The screenshot was built from nothing. Engineered to land in exactly the environment it landed in. Designed to exploit the pre-existing energy between those two names and turn it into something explosive. It worked better than anyone could have planned because the audience was already primed. The months of organic cultural crossover between Reese and Edwards had created the perfect conditions for that fabrication to be believed. And once it was believed that scale, the correction never caught up. Now here is where the story turns. Because while all of that was still in motion, while the screenshot was still being passed around like it was documentation, and the takes were still stacking, Wendell Carter Jr. shot down in front of a camera. And what he said in that interview hit completely differently depending on how much you already knew about everything that had been swirling around his name. Think about the position he was in. His relationship with Angel Rhee had been the subject of public speculation for months, with no official confirmation from either of them. The story of whether they were together was already alive in the culture, at full volume. And now, in the middle of all of that, a screenshot had dropped across the entire internet, suggesting that one of the most famous players in the NBA had publicly expressed that he would rather pay $500,000 than date the woman Carter had been seen attending games for, showing up to birthday parties for, and standing close to at public events. Every person who followed Carter, every person who followed Rhee, and every music person who followed Edwards had a theory about what that screenshot meant for the Carter and Rhee situation. Music. The noise was at its loudest point. That is the environment Carter was walking into when he sat down or run it back. He was asked about his connection to Angel Rhee, and he did not flinch. He did not sidestep. He did not treat the question like it was something he needed to escape. He sat with it, chose his words with deliberate care, and said something that stopped the entire conversation cold. He told them they would find out when they needed to find out, that they should leave it at that. And then he said the words that hit differently for every person who heard them in the context of everything that had been swirling around his name. That is my girl. We're locked in for sure. Let that land. That is my girl. We're locked in. Not delivered hot. Not delivered with any edge or anger or desperation. Delivered with a steady, grounded calm of someone who had already decided where he stood long before the question was asked and was simply choosing a moment to let the world catch up. There was no performance in it. No need to convince anyone of anything. No reaching for validation from an audience that had been speculating about his relationship for months. Just a man who knew what he had and was not remotely rattled by anything the internet had thrown at the situation. Some people heard that statement as a man staking his claim in the middle of a public storm involving one of the biggest names in basketball. Others heard it as a deliberate message aimed directly at weeks of speculation without ever dignifying that speculation by naming it. Both readings work because Carter left just enough space for interpretation or simultaneously closing off any possibility that the relationship between him and Angel Rhee was in question. He did not say Anthony Edwards' name. He did not acknowledge the screenshot. He did not reference a single thing that had been circulating in every comment section and podcast segment connected music to his name. He addressed the entire situation by making the entire situation irrelevant. 5 words, 1 sentence.
Done.
Reese answered in her own language shortly after. She posted an Instagram collage that included a photo of herself in a customized Orlando Magic jersey. The words written on it read, "My man." No statement, no interview, no direct response to anything that had been circulating for months. Just a jersey in the colors of the team Wendell Carter Jr. suits up for every night. And that single image communicated everything that 2 music people who had decided to tell their own story on their own timeline needed it to say without addressing the noise, without naming what they were responding to, and without giving the rumor machine a single thing it could turn into another route of content. By November 2025, Carter removed whatever ambiguity remained. During a FanDuel appearance, he confirmed the relationship plainly, confidently, and without hedging. He laid it out on the record the way people who have already made up their minds laid things out, not as an announcement, but as a statement of something that had already been true for a while. He was done letting the story exist in frames that other people had built around it. The relationship of Wendell Carter Jr. and Angel Reese had moved from whisper to full public confirmation, entirely on their schedule, in their words, at their pace, not one day before they decided they would be. Reese had already laid out exactly how she felt about public relationships long before any of this. After the Fletcher split in early 2024, the reaction was so overwhelming she publicly swore off sharing her personal life until she was married. That statement became its own content cycle. Her privacy turned into a public debate, which is its own kind of irony. Everything that followed with Carter was navigated with every lesson from that experience applied. Signals came on her terms at her pace when she decided they would. Nobody forced the jersey post. Nobody forced appearances at Magic games. All of it was deliberate. All of it was calculated. And all of it arrived on a timeline that Carter and Reese controlled entirely. The way both of them move through the Edward story in the middle of that confirms something important about who they are individually. Carter did not panic. He did not take the bait. He did not give the fabricated narrative the dramatic public reaction it was engineered to produce. And Reese did not feel the need to address Edwards by name, explain herself, or respond to a story that had been built on a screenshot that never existed. Between the 2 of them, the entire manufacturer situation was handled without ever being directly confronted. The story of Angel Reese and Anthony Edwards was a fabrication built on pre-existing energy, a real moment of public support that the audience reframed as romantic interest, and a manufactured screenshot dropped into the perfect music conditions to be believed at scale. Wendell Carter Jr. stepped into all of that with 5 words and closed it without raising his voice, without calling out a single name, without giving the noise the dramatic reaction it was designed to produce. That is my girl. We are locked in. Everything that came after that was just the world catching up to what he already knew. What are your thoughts on how this whole situation played out? Drop it in the comments. Music. And if you want more content that gets beneath the surface of the stories everybody is talking about, hit the video on screen right